if you don't want to be consistent, that's okay, right? But you also have to understand your expectations and your results are going to be a little bit different. And if you end up frustrated, and then you end up quitting because you think you should be getting results you're not, then you're going to end up like the majority of podcasts that end up not making it. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed the latest episode. It was episode number 35. There's a big difference between listens and listeners, really talking about the importance of nurturing your audience. Many people think having a podcast is going to lead directly to money. Usually that doesn't happen. There has to be some sort of nurture in there somewhere. Today, for episode number 36, a perfect example of why you can't win without consistency. This is something you've heard me say a million times. And the reason I want to do this episode is because I think oftentimes data tells us things that words don't. So I've said it many times, and I think people have an understanding of why is consistency so important, especially when it comes to podcasting. But I actually have the graph of a former client's, current client. It is their listens month over month. And I'm obviously going to keep this anonymous because I want to respect this person's privacy. And I don't want this to be taken as a negative, because here's the thing. Everybody has different intentions with their podcast. Everybody wants different results. And this client has never once come to me and said, hey, I want results that I don't have, or my expectations were completely different. I think that the client understands that with this level of consistency, the result probably won't be super great. So I just want to throw that out there. This isn't a place to shame. It's not, hey, this client is doing all the wrong things and this is what you shouldn't do. I just think this is a really good example of, and I'll have a couple examples, but this is a really good example of why you just can't win without consistency. You just can't. And the data and the numbers show that. So this is what we're going to do in this episode. Since we're predominantly we're mostly audio, I will kind of walk you through the numbers. Now, obviously there's going to be a lot of numbers here, but you will understand, hopefully, if I can explain it correctly. So this is a podcast that started in February of 2020. So in February of 2020, this person had 8 downloads. I think it started at the end of February. March 2020, 206 downloads. April, 271. May, 500. June, 851. July, 1,000. August 2020, 1,400. So in 6 months, they went from 0 to 1,400 downloads per month. Now, this is where the lack of consistency starts. The next month, we have 1,000. So we went from 1,400 to 1,000. Now, again, that is normal. Those kinds of things happen. That's completely not out of the realm of normalcy. But since I know why that happened, I think it's important to state that. So we go from 1,000 in September 2020 to 1,212. So the next month we went up 200. The next month we went down 200. The month after that we went down another 100. Then we went back up to 1,200. So this is what I'm seeing currently. Ooh, this episode speaks to me. Ooh, this is January 2021. Okay, so we've been around for 9 months at this point. 10 months. 11 months. I don't know. Yeah, 11 months. Our highest month so far has been 1,400 listens, but then we have dipped down as low as 930. Okay. We have another 1,200 month in January, and then we dipped to 750 in February. Now, here's the interesting thing. Found value. I just ate. Word of advice. Do not eat before you record, especially if it makes you, I don't know how to explain it, but when I eat, things happen in my throat. So in February 2021, this person had 750 downloads. Now, they jumped up to 1,300 the next month. Then it went down to 1,000, 929, 916. So they're kind of flat here. Then something very interesting happens. They go from 900 to 2,000. So they doubled in the course of a month. That was, I believe there was a big YouTube episode that went out there that did really well. Then they went down to 1,400, 1,600, then back down to 1,091. So this is what I'm seeing. The majority of these episodes are the majority of these months are averaging around 1,000 downloads. But we do have peaks up to 2,400, 2,100, peaks like that, 2,000. Here's the thing, and it's very hard to explain this without seeing it. But just with anything else that you're tracking, when it comes to numbers and data, you expect a curve. Now, all I mean by that is if you think of, think if you had 1,000 downloads the first year, then you had 5,000 the next year, then you had 10,000 the next year, then you had 15,000, you had 20,000, you had 30,000, you'd see a curve on the graph. The problem with this lack of consistency is the down months are offsetting the up months. So all I mean by that is that the up month where we're having 2,400 downloads is getting negated by the fact that we only have 1,300 the next month because we didn't produce content. Now, here's really the tell, okay? Somebody wants to work with... So, starting in September 2022, there was a lot of inconsistency. So we had 2,000 downloads in September 2022, one of the top 3 months ever. The consistency starts to dwindle. So we go to 1,500, 1,000, go back up to 1,500, and then we drop down to 710 and 782. So in the last few months, this person is having less downloads than they did in their third or fourth month in. Yeah, their fourth month. This is the problem. In theory, you should never have the amount of downloads you did in the first month because that means we're doing something wrong. That means we're losing listeners. They're not coming back. So this just goes directly to what I was saying. I don't know if it was last week or the week before. It was last week with the nurturing. This podcast has not nurtured their audience very well through consistency. Consistency is a nurture because you're there every single week. So here's my thought. If somebody listens to this podcast and this podcaster doesn't drop an episode for a week or 2 weeks and you still want what they talk about, you're going to have to go find it elsewhere. And you might find it elsewhere and then figure out, you know what? I actually really like this show. And you may never come back to this show. Okay? Now, here's the truth. This person's got 44,000 downloads currently, which is not bad. I mean, most shows never get there. If they stayed consistent like they were, I would expect that they would have another at least 10 or 15,000. Probably more than, they'd probably be around 60,000 as opposed to 44,000 if they stayed consistent because that's the way the graph was going. But in April of 2022, things started to shift and now those numbers are actually going down. It's not a good look. Now, can this person rebound? Absolutely. And they can come back. But it's very hard to do that. It's very hard to do that because if somebody goes and listens to another episode on another show and they like it, they may never come back.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hurvitz. So last year I wanted to quit everything. I wanted to throw in the towel. I wanted to hang up my microphone. And Kevin said no. Kevin said, keep going, Jen. You've got this. And oh my God, I'm going to cry. And I did. Coaches need coaches, y'all. And working with Kevin has been one of the best experiences of my life. Oh my God, I'm crying. Kevin, you are the best. I could not do this without you. And thank you. Thank you for being you and the amazing human that you are.
So what I'll do, I'll actually screenshot this. I'll have to figure out how to do it, but maybe I'll screenshot this so you can see it. The only problem is it's hard to tell exactly where the numbers are because you have to scroll over it to see it. So I'll see what I can do with that. Here's my other thought. This is another thing that I am kind of against. I do not like podcast seasons for most clients. And here's why. Because something very unique happens where let's just use this as an example. So say you're starting a podcast and you say, all right, I'm going to do 3 months of episodes. I'm going to take a month off. I'm going to do another 3 months of episodes. Then I'm going to take a month off. Then I'm going to do another 3 and I'm going to take a month off. This is what usually happens. Say you have 1,000 downloads in your first month, and then say you get to 2,000 downloads in your second month, And then say you get to 3,000 downloads in your third month, that month you take off usually brings you back down to the 1,000 you had in the first month. So then you go 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, break. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, break. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, break. I have seen that with almost all the clients we have that have seasons. Now, if you're like a true crime podcast, a movie review podcast, something like that, it might not necessarily be the same for you, but I have seen that across the board. I have seen that with all the shows I have worked with, maybe other than a couple, that is the trend that seems to happen for them. And it makes sense, right? What are people supposed to do when you're gone for a month? What they're going to go, they have to go find another podcast to listen to. And if you don't have good communication with them, how are they even going to know that you brought your podcast back? Unless you post it on social media and they follow you, they might not even know. If they're not subscribed, they're not going to see your new episodes launch. So that's another interesting thing. I am always against seasons if the ultimate goal is to grow your show, is to really scale it out there in a big way and then make money from it, right? So even the client that I was talking about that has the 44,000 downloads, this client definitely could be monetizing their podcast in a different way, in a better way, whatever it may be. That's just not necessarily in alignment with why they started the podcast. So that's why I'm saying it's not a bad thing the way they're doing it. It's not what I would do, but I'm also focused on growing our podcast to as many listens as humanly possible because that's more impact. The big takeaway I want for you to have is from day to day, it's very hard to recognize the difference. It's very hard to recognize contrast from day to day. But when you have 3 years of data right in front of you, you can see, oh, we hit a high point and then we really started going down. And those down months are a sign of something else. Now, at some point, what I'd like to do is look and see what the consumption rate of this is, but maybe that's another episode. And again, I just want to reiterate, this isn't from a place of this client's terrible and they should be doing everything differently. This is what they signed up for. They didn't necessarily want to do it differently than this, even though I had advised that. That's totally fine. Different clients want different results. So I want to make sure I put that out there because, again, not everybody wants to do 7 episodes a week and never miss like we do. Everybody's building something a little bit different. But I do want you to take away the fact that in the beginning, this person was very consistent. And the second they stopped being consistent, they had a down trough. And from there, it's kind of all over the place until the next bout of consistency. And then the second that consistency wanes, they have a down trough, right? That's kind of how it works because really what we're doing is we're trying to get people's attention. And if you are not there posting new content, you're most likely not going to get people's attention. Now, I have other clients. Let me pull up somebody else. I have other clients who have never missed episodes. And when we look at their graph, they have a constant growth. It's not up and down. And if it is up and down, it's not nearly up and down to that extent. I mean, going from 2,500 downloads to 700 downloads in a month, that is a symptom of lack of consistency. And that's just a very big difference. Let me pull up somebody else's who's very consistent. And again, never missed. See, I'm looking at another show. And if you look at the trend line, it's up the whole time. They started with 15 downloads their first month. Then they went to 278. Then they went to 291, 423, 671, 872. Okay, cool. Then they started to plateau a little bit. That makes sense because usually the first, 4 or 5 months, you're gaining traction and then people tend to fall off, right? So then they had 765, 700, 715, 650, 600, 750, 600, and then they grew to 1,100, 830, 1,300. Then they went back down a little bit, but they never went back down to their first couple months. And then they ended up hitting a really big growth. They doubled from 1,000 to 2,000 in October because they switched up their approach when it comes to their audience. So I know there's a lot of numbers in this episode. And honestly, you don't necessarily have to You don't have to understand every number. This is just my thought process. A lot of people talk about the importance of consistency. I do as well, but I want to be able to actually show the importance of the consistency. And through the example that I'm using here, I think that's probably the best way to do it. So decide what you want out of your podcast, because if you don't want to be consistent, that's okay, right? But you also have to understand your expectations and your results are going to be a little bit different. And if you end up frustrated, and then you end up quitting because you think you should be getting results you're not, then you're going to end up like the majority of podcasts that end up not making it. And I don't want that for you. My goal with these episodes is really to pull back the curtain on, somebody who has a lot of data and say, hey, this is what I've seen over the 3,000 episodes we've produced and then all the other episodes we've done. So that is my goal in this episode. If you're interested, this is what I'll do. If you're interested, reach out and I will send you a screenshot, because other than that, it's kind of a pain in the butt. I got to host it on Google Drive and it's a whole thing. So just reach out to me and I'll send you a screenshot. I think that's probably the best way. And as always, if you want a free call, please, I think I did like 20 free calls last month. It was amazing. I met so many awesome people. So if you're looking for a free call, please just reach out. Click the link in the show notes. Not a sales call. Not going to sell you on anything, nothing like that. I just want to add value to the amazing community that we are creating. So next week, we are going to go back into more tactics. So three more reasons podcasters don't win. I have, and I might change that title, but I have an understanding now that there's really only a couple things that stop people from succeeding, especially in the podcast space. So again, I don't know if we're going to name it that. I just jotted that down as a note in between calls here. So it's going to be, the three main ways to grow, or the three, I don't know yet. I haven't named it yet. So I will make sure that is a good one next week, and that'll be a little bit more tactical. It'll be a deeper understanding and tactics episode. And I think that's it. That's all I got today. Again, if you're interested in the screenshot, please reach out. I will send it to you. And if you're interested in a free call, please click the link in the show notes. Hopefully we can meet behind the scenes and have a good call about podcasting. All right, Podcast Growth You. Until next week, keep crushing it. Keep on podcasting. Stay consistent, because I don't want you to end up one of those podcasters who said, yeah, I could have been a successful podcaster, or I could have got to 100 episodes if I just kept showing up. I want you to have the level of success that you want. I want you to have the level of success that you deserve, depending on how much work you're putting in, and I want to help guide you there. Until next week, I appreciate you all, and keep on podcasting.